The Kutasich is Chelek of Gimel, Chukas, Aleph. This is also a siyum on the Gemara Masechta Megillah, Lili Nishmas Reb Yosef Binyamin ben Reb Menashe Kaltman. The Sikh is going to teach us that even a kasal kadaitach, even a suggestion in the Gemara that ultimately gets refuted, also has much to teach us, enhances our understanding of the topic. And today we're going to learn about the relationship of the Torah and the Mentala, the cover of the Sefer Torah. Sif Aleph is going to serve as an introduction to the Sikha. And from Sif Beis, we're going to learn about the Gemara, the end of the Megillah, end of Masechta Megillah. Eine von die enter in Shas, wo the Gemara is Medame und Mash B'Torah zu Adam, in one of the places where the Gemara compares a person and Torah, which is hinted to in our parsha, which begins with the words Zeis HaTorah, Adam Kiyamus, etc. So it says Torah and Adam together. So from this we see that there's a comparison between Torah and Adam. And that's how why we're discussing it this week, because in Parshas Chukas there is this reference to the comparison of Torah and Adam. Where in Shas do we see, among other places, this comparison is in Mesiyu Masechta Megillah, which we're going to talk about today. Now, der Vergleich von Torah la'Adam, the general comparison between the Torah and a person, is b'ribu yinyanim. We find it in many aspects. Onhebendik as a zevi Adam zusammengestellt von Guf und Neshama as oizech b'Torah. One aspect would be that just like the person is made up of body and soul, so too the Torah is made up of body and soul. The body is the nigla, the revealed parts of Torah, the Gemara, the Halacha, etc. And the Neshama, Nishmasa Deiraisa, the soul of Torah, is the mystical, the esoteric, the Chassidus. Another area of comparison is Ba'adim is a person has 248 limbs and 365 sinews or veins. So too Torah teaches us 248 positive mitzvahs and 365 negative mitzvahs, and there are others as well. So we have a general comparison that the Torah has the Torah like a person has Guf and Neshama, Torah like a person has Ramach and Shasa. Okay, but throughout the Gemara, throughout Shas, we find other comparisons as well. One of them is in the end of Masechta Megillah. Now, because we're talking about our parsha Zeis HaTorah Adam, so the Rebbe says as follows: the parsha Seinu by Zeis HaTorah Adam is the Hemshech Adam Kiyamus Ba'oil. So the pasuk continues, a person that will pass away in a covered space. Al derech zeh wird der Teuchen von dem Vergleich zwischen Torah und Adam in Masechta Megillah herausgebracht bescheiches mit Misa. And this, the end of Masechta Megillah, where we're going to talk about the comparison between a person and the Torah, is also going to be in the context of death. Because the statement is, and here the Rebbe gives us in short, and in Sif Beis the Rebbe will give us the whole piece of the Gemara. Omer Reb Farnach kol ha'oiches Sefer Torah arum nikber arum. Reb Farnach said, whoever holds a Sefer Torah while it's uncovered, without its covering, meaning the Torah is uncovered, then he will be buried uncovered, he'll be buried without clothes. We'll see soon what the Gemara says about that, but we're talking about nikbar. We're talking about a person that's being buried. So we see that the Sefer Torah and the person are being discussed in the same context, and it is in the context of death. Nochmer, there's a deeper connection between the Gemara in Megillah and the pasuk Zeis HaTorah Adam in Parshas Chukas. Because Keshem vi beParshas Seinu redt sich nit nor beinyan hamisa kishla atzma. No b'shayches to din tuma. Our parsha, when it discusses the Zeis HaTorah Adam, it's not just talking about death. It's also talking about the tuma, the ritual uncleanliness that is a result of the death. Al derech says by dem limudanal, also by this teaching of Rabbi Farnach, as mitzadem vos kol ha'oiches Sefer Torah arum nikber arum, that because the Reb Farnach said that whoever holds a Sefer Torah bare will be buried bare. Hat men geiser given tuma af yodayim. Because of that, it also affects the tuma of the yodayim, the tuma of the hands. And the quote from the Gemara in Shabbos is af yodayim aboy machma sefer poisles esatruma mishum de Reb Farnach. I want to explain a little bit of context here, even though it's not mamish negea to the rest of the Sikha, but just to understand what the Rebbe is talking about right over here. The Gemara in Shabbos, meaning to say, generally we're talking about the Gemara in Megillah, but this din of Yodayim is in the Gemara in Shabbos. And in the Gemara in Shabbos, the Gemara is discussing a number of different gzeiros, institutions that the Chachamim, that the sages instituted with regards to Tumah. For example, the Chachamim said that the scrolls of the Sifrei Kodesh, of the Torah, make Truma Tameh. Why? So the Gemara explains, the Kohanim used to hide their Truma next to the Torahs. Why? Because they would say, this is holy, this is holy. They could be together. What was happening was the mice would come to eat the Truma, and they would nibble on the Torah scrolls, and they would ruin the Torah. So in order that the Kohanim should not hide their Truma next to the Torah scrolls, so the Chachamim said that the Hasfarim of Kisvei Kodesh are mitame, they defile the Truma. Another gzeira, stam yodayim, hands that you were not careful to have just washed them, and you don't know where they were in the recent past. They passel the truma because yodayim askani is saying, because hands touch things without a person realizing, and a person might have touched something that was tamei. So now, if he touches the truma without washing his hands, the truma becomes tamei. Then the Gemara brings a braisa that if a person's hands touch the Torah, even if he washed his hands before that, and he knew that the hands didn't touch anything that was tamei per se, but if he touched the Torah scroll directly and then he touched the truma, then the truma becomes tamei. Why? Because since Reb Farnach taught that if a person is not allowed to touch the Torah without a cover, so therefore the Chachamim were geyser, in order for the person to avoid touching the Torah, the Chachamim were geyser that if a person touches the Torah, besides the other issues that the Gemara and Megillah discusses, in addition to that, if he then touches Truma, the Truma would become Tameh. And that would cause the person to refrain from touching a Torah without a cover. So that's the Gemara, the discussion in the Gemara in Shabbos. So we see that this teaching of Reb Farnach, that a person shouldn't touch a Torah without the Torah being covered, or without a mentala or something between the person's hands and the Torah. So first of all, it's death related, because Nikbar Aram, the consequences that he's buried without his clothing. It's also Tumah related, because it affects the fact that a person's hands become Tameh just for touching a Torah. So, and this relates to Parshas Chukas, which it says Zeisa Torah Adam, and it discusses death and it discusses Tumah. So far, the Rebbe said that there's a general comparison between the human being, between a person and Torah. The Guf and Neshama, Ramach Mitzvah Shasalois. There is a comparison that is mentioned in the Gemara Megillah that is both death related and also Tumah related, as Parshas Chukas is death related and Tumah related. V'yesh leimar. So now let us say, as in der Sugi b'Masechta Megillah, in this discussion of the Gemara in Masechta Megillah, kum tzu achidish, there is something new that is introduced. Sai in dem inyan von Sefer Torah Arum umit pachas Sefer Torah, both in the discussion about an uncovered Sefer Torah and the mentala, the cover of the Sefer Torah. Sai in dem inyan von Torah umitzvos v'shayachet zum Adam, and also in the relationship between Torah umitzvos and a person. Kida lekaman, as we will discuss. So in other words, once we understand the Gemara and Megillah, we're going to understand something deeper about the connection of the Sefer Torah and its cover. We're also going to understand a deeper connection between Torah mitzvahs and the person. Sif Beis, we're now going to begin to go to the end of Masechta Megillah. This is the words of the Gemara. If somebody holds a Sefer Torah while it is uncovered, meaning to say the cover, the mentala is not on it, the cover is not on it, Nikbar Arum, he is buried unclothed, without the shrouds. You think literally it means that he's buried without clothing? Says the Gemara, no, it means that he's buried without his mitzvahs. It means when he dies, he doesn't take his mitzvahs with him. Do you really think that he has no mitzvahs whatsoever? So Abaye said, Nikbar Arum beloy oisa mitzvah. It means that he's buried naked without that specific mitzvah that he was doing at the time that he was holding the Sefer Torah Arum uncovered. So we have to discuss this Gemara, but the Rebbe is going to begin by asking the question, what is the rationale behind the original suggestions, either that he's buried without clothing, without shrouds, or that he's buried without any mitzvahs? What is even the svara, the rationale behind those suggestions? Says moving to Pashut, we feel more geret, it's self-understood. As afilu akos al kedaitech in Gemara, hatamakim b'seichel. That even a suggestion in the Gemara that ultimately is refuted, it still has a legitimate rationale to understand it. Even in the rationale of Torah, even Torah understands that there is a reason to give this suggestion. We're talking about sages, that their entire involvement was in Torah. So obvious, if they're suggesting something, it wouldn't be something random that doesn't fit in to the way of thinking of Torah. If the Tanoim v'Amiroim are suggesting it, it means that they believed that Torah can handle this kind of reasoning. Nochmer, additionally, Rav Ashi Mesader Gemara hat doch nicht reingestellt in Gemara jeder Shakel V'Tari because al Kedaitach was gesagt geworden bei Beis Medrash. Rav Ashi, who compiled the Gemara, did not insert every single discussion and every single suggestion that was brought up in the Beis Medrash. Chachas is moving as euch jenes svaras am gehad not beseichel Torah. Although it's understood that even the discussions that did not make it into the Gemara, but were had by the sages in the house of study, clearly, they were coming from a place that it was rational to approach this even from a Torah perspective. Especially as it applies to the topic that they were talking about it at the time. They wouldn't have brought it up otherwise. And nevertheless, there's many discussions and suggestions that Rav Ashi did not insert into the Gemara. Is von dem was dies Svares because al Kedaitach hat Rashi hereingestellt. So from the fact that these suggestions and these ideas Rav Ashi did place into the Gemara is moving. It's understood as nid bleis haben sie an Orten seichel was bara von Torah, that not only can they be explained, can they be understood rationally according to Torah. No, das is meisif havane v'asbara in the limit from the Bashtim Tersugya. Rav Ashi puts it into the Gemara because it enhances the understanding of this topic that's being discussed. Wherever Rav Ashi puts in something, even if the Gemara refutes it, and we don't necessarily follow that approach, but the fact that Rav Ashi put it in as a suggestion, it means that it helps us understand the sugya, the topic. It could even help us understand the halachic, practical conclusion of this topic. So, in short, if there's a kosalka daitach, if there's a suggestion in the Gemara, it must have some validity to it. Because now we have to understand what is the rationale of these suggestions. Either that he's buried without the shrouds, or that he's buried without his mitzvahs. What is the rationale behind these approaches, that because a person held an uncovered Sefer Torah, therefore he would be buried without his shrouds, or he would be buried without his mitzvahs? So Sif Gimel, the Rebbe is going to give a suggestion, a kosal kadaitach, and the Rebbe is going to say that this can't be the whole thing. Okay. The pastors yesh leimar. So on a very basic level, we can say, as koleiches Sefer Torah Arum Nikbar Arum, the fact that the Parnach says that whoever holds a Sefer Torah uncovered will be buried uncovered. Uncovered means without shrouds. The ground, the earth will of course cover his burial spot. But when he says Arum, it means without clothing, without shrouds. So it's not just a random punishment. It is a consequence of what the person did. In other words, it is an automatic reaction to a specific action that was done. A punishment that fits the crime. But we'll see later the word it's a midah keneged midah, but something that happens by itself. An Adam is geglichen to a Sefer Torah. A person is compared to a Sefer Torah. Wie die Gemara sagt, as the Gemara says, hey, if someone is standing beside a person at the moment where his neshama leaves the body, he has an obligation, even though it's not a relative or anything like that, but he still has an obligation to tear his garments, to rend his garments. What is this compared to? To a Sefer Torah that was burnt. Chas v'shalom, a person is present when a Sefer Torah goes up in flames. He has an obligation to rais kriya. So too, if a person was present at the passing of another human being, Rahman al-Islam, he has an obligation to rais kriya. So we see over here the comparison between the person and the Sefer Torah. Is b'derach mamela, therefore, automatically, when halta Sefer Torah arum, if he's holding the Sefer Torah without its cover, is so he too loses his own coverings, his clothes, when it comes to the point that he's buried in the ground. In other words, it's automatic. Since the Torah and the human being are compared to each other, so if the Torah doesn't have its clothes, the person doesn't have its clothes. So this is the suggestion. The Gemara says Nikbar Arum, because since that's how he treated the Torah, that's how he is treated. The Gemara is a b'sheil this for this fara, and to follow this reasoning. So then, in that case, what's the Gemara's question? So the Gemara negates this idea. Arum salkadaitach, but Nikbar Arum on levushim is doch an einish narfaren guf. The problem with this the Gemara has is that the body is the one that's buried. The soul goes to heaven, even if part of the soul still stays below. But the part that's not being covered, that's not being clothed, is the body. So if a person knows a Sefer Torah Arum, if you say that it means that he's being buried without the shrouds, the guf, the body of the person, is receiving the consequence. But the comparison of a person with the Torah is from the neshama of the person. That brings in Torah 14 that the Torah is called Ner, a candle, like it says, Ki Ner Mitzvah Torah Oir, and the neshama is called Ner, a candle, Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. So it's the neshama part of the person that's compared to the Torah. So since the whole reason that you're saying that there's nikbar arum is because of the comparison of guf and of the comparison of Sefer Torah and person, where does this comparison take place? In the neshama. So then the punishment, the consequence, should be on the neshama. So that's the Gemara. According to this explanation, the Gemara is asking, what does it help at nikbar arum if the neshama is not getting the consequence? Therefore, the Gemara says that he's buried without mitzvahs. But that says here, this would be a more appropriate punishment. Therefore, says because he's holding the Sefer Torah uncovered. Kumtim as zayin arum in mitzvahs. So what we do is we take away his mitzvahs. The mitzvah that would serve as a punishment for the neshama. So since you held the Sefer Torah uncovered, you lose your mitzvahs. So your neshama also is receiving the punishment, the consequence from your actions. Of them, it's the Gemara. So now the Gemara asks again: do you think he loses all of his mitzvahs? Why would you take away all of his mitzvahs? He did one thing wrong, okay, but why would he lose all of his mitzvahs because of it? Rabbi comes and says, Nikbar Arum b'lo mitzvah. Taka right, he doesn't lose all the mitzvahs. Arum b'lo mitzvahs means without the mitzvah or the mitzvahs that he was doing while he was holding the Sefer Torah Arum. So this is bepashtus, the way you could tie it to the flow of the Gemara. Now the Gemara says Nikbar Arum, it's midah keneged midah, it's an automatic consequence. So the Gemara says 1 second, that doesn't help because the neshama is not getting any of the consequences. So we say Arum b'lei mitzvah, so the neshama does get some of the consequences. So the Gemara says why all the mitzvahs? The Gemara says you're right. The Rabbi says no, just the mitzvahs that he was doing while holding the Sefer Torah Arum. The Pirush is Nidglatik, the Rebbe refutes this explanation. He says that this can't be the Pirush. And the Rebbe explains, of der erste Svara, besteht in dem was Nikbar Arum, is verbunden mit dem Guf allein. If the problem that he has with the first Pirush is that if you bury the body without shrouds, you're really only punishing the body and not the soul. Und es ist nicht kein Eines, weil der Neshama, was mit hat Ide sehr geglichen zu Sefer Torah, and the Neshama is not getting punished. And it's the Neshama that is being compared to the Sefer Torah. Hat die Gemara gedarf meitig sein in der Kasche, der Wort Nikbar. Nikbar Arum sal kadaitach. So the issue of the Gemara is not with Arum. As we see, Arum B'loi Mitzvahs, the Gemara had no problem with it. This problem. The problem is the Nikbar. The problem is that you're burying the body without clothes. So really the issue that the Gemara has, according to this explanation that the Rabbi gave in Sif Gimel, is not so much with the Arum, but with the Nikbar. So in that case, the Gemara should have, in its question, included the word Nikbar in the question. Nikbar Arum Salka Daitoch. You think you're burying the body without clothing? Is that what you're suggesting? Gemara is mashma, but from the way the Gemara is structured, it seems to imply, as the Shaklavatari is done, that the issue isn't over here the body or the soul. See, the Gufa the Neshama says not an Arum, the Teichen Einish. The Gemara seems to have a bigger problem with the concept that the person is Arum than with the fact that it's Gufa or Neshama. The way the Gemara says Arum kasal kadaitoch, the problem is with the Arum, not with the Nikbar. So if this is the Pshat in the Gemara would have said Nikbar. So therefore, this can't be the Pshat. So now we're back to our original question from the end of Seif Beis. What is the Svara, what is the rationale of these two first opinions? One, that the person is buried without clothing, without shrouds, and two, that the person is buried without mitzvahs, the person doesn't get his mitzvahs when he passes away. Before we get to the beer, we're going to look at Tosfos. Tosfos is going to teach the pshat. What does Abaya mean? Arum b'loy oisa mitzvah. He's naked without that mitzvah. And we're going to ask two questions on Tosfos. When we get to the Maskana Gemara, Arum b'loy oisa mitzvah zok Tosfos. With regards to the conclusion of the Gemara, the opinion of Abaya, that naked means without that mitzvah, Tosfos says like this. Yes, mefarshim mitzvah sachiza. There's some that say, what mitzvah are we talking about? The mitzvah of holding the Torah. Which basically means that when a person holds the Torah with the proper kavod, with the proper respect, so he's fulfilling the mitzvah of kavod of Sefer Torah, that it's being held properly. So the Yesod says that if he didn't hold the Sefer Torah, if the Sefer Torah was arum, was uncovered, then he doesn't get the mitzvah of properly holding a Sefer Torah. The kasher for like Tosfos, mighty b'seh, what's the chiddush? Pshita shein lischar, kivin shlei asa mitzvah kaigen. Obviously, he can't get the reward for this mitzvah because he didn't do it right. The whole mitzvah is to hold the Sefer Torah in a proper way. If you didn't hold the mitzvah in the proper way, there's no schar for it. Kach pirush Riva. Therefore, the Riva, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Asher, explains beloy oisa mitzvah she'asa b'oisa shah. It's not talking about the mitzvah of holding the Sefer Torah. Talk about the mitzvah that he was doing at the time that he was holding the Torah. And Tosfos gives an examples. Shim acha Sefer Torah arum v'karaboy. That if a person was holding the Sefer Torah uncovered and learning from the Torah, ein lischar min hakriya, reading from the Torah, ein lischar min hakriya, he doesn't get schar for reading the Torah because the Torah wasn't covered properly. Or he held the Sefer Torah to cover it, to wrap it up, or to check it and to fix it. Same thing. There's no schar for fixing the Torah or for being geilul the Torah if he touched the Torah arum. And Tosfos concludes, Aval ochze b'mitpachas. But if the person holds the Sefer Torah with a mentala, with a cover, then on the right hand side he has long life. On the left hand side he has wealth and honor. Davon verstehen. So Rabbi says we have to understand, just like we had to understand before, what is the svara of the opinions in the Gemara, that nikbar arum without clothing or nikbar arum without mitzvahs. We also have to understand these two opinions. What is their svara? What is the rationale behind their svara? What is the logic behind these two opinions? Does without the mitzvah, that a person is buried without the reward of that mitzvah, mean without the mitzvah of holding the Sefer Torah? Kedasi Yes Mefarshim, which is the opinion of the first opinion in Tosfos, which is said in the name of Yes Mefarshim. And the Rebbe adds for them, but Rashi is going to Mefarshim Beleiz Mitzvah. Since Rashi says nothing, is mashmas oich learned kipashtus lashon Gemara as das meint mitzvah chiza. Since Rashi says nothing, obviously Rashi is following this most simple basic understanding of the Gemara that it means the mitzvah of holding the Torah. As the Rabbi says in the Ha'ara, if Rashi held like the Riva, like the second opinion of Tosfos, then it's somewhat a deviation from the Pashto Pshat of the Gemara, and Rashi would have to say something. So the Rashi clearly is following the opinion of the Yesh Mefarshim. So what is their thought process that leads them to say that it means mitzvah achiza? Other mitzvahs kriya, glilu, and agav, ibalder, zegetam, peisashak, pirush ariva, or that it means the mitzvah of holding of reading from the Torah, or rolling, or wrapping up the Torah, or fixing the Torah, which he was doing at the time that he was holding it when it was not covered, as the Riva said. What's the logic behind their approaches? Why does each of these reach this thinking? Base, and there's one more question. What is Tosfos coming to tell us when he tells us at the very end that if a person holds the Torah with a mentala, then he has long life on one side, he has wealth and honor on the other side? What's Tosfos doing over here? Seemingly, Tosfos wants to end on a positive note. This Tosfos is the last Tosfos in Masechta Megillah. So he wants to end the Masechta on a positive note. And that's why when the Gemara in Masechta Shabbos has the same discussion, the story of the statement of Reb Farnach and the back and forth, Tosfos does not bring this. A statement of why? Because in Shabbos it's a Daf Yudalid, which is not anywhere close to the Siyum HaMasechtas. There's no inyan of Mesayim B'Toiv. So with Pashtus, that's why Tosfos does it. But in the Zogan does the ganze Tam. But we can't say that that's the entire reason. Because if all Tosfos wants to accomplish with this is to end on a positive note, he could have ended positively. But if he holds it with a mentala, then he has the schar, he has the reward from reading the Torah while holding it with the mitpachas, or anything like that, without a need to introduce an entirely new idea, a pasuk, and it's a pasuk that seemingly is not connected to this. So it can't just be for the purpose of Masayim and B'Toiv. So therefore, what is Tosfos adding on with this last final statement about Eirech Yom V'Mina B'Smeila Esher V'Chavit? So in Sifei, we're going to begin to understand the beer. The Rebbe is going to say that there's three approaches to how you look at the relationship between the mitpachas and the Sefer Torah. What is the mitpachas? What is the mentala? What is the cover doing for the Torah? And once you understand the three different approaches, you'll understand the three opinions in the Gemara. Let's begin. The 3 days in the Pirus v'Nikbar Orum seinen in dem Geder von mitpachas b'shaychas l'Sefer Torah. The three opinions and for the three approaches with regard to Nikbar Orum will be about the definition of the mitpachas, of the cover of the Torah as it relates to the Torah. But that's which can be learned in a number of ways. Aleph, number one. The cover is not relevant to the Torah itself. It's an external thing, so that the person should be able to hold the Torah. Which a person has to hold the Torah in an honorable way, not in a disgraceful way. And therefore, for the person to be able to hold the Torah, we have a mitpachas, we have a cover. It's for the person more than it is for the Torah. Almost as if to say that if the Torah was always in the Aron Kodesh and never had to be carried out, there would be no need for a mitpachas. That's one approach. The mitpachas is more for the person that needs to carry the Torah. The second approach is that it's not just so that the person should be able to hold the Torah, nor does is negeya unmeisif in cover the Sefer Torah mitzad atzma. The mentala, it adds, it increases the honor of the Torah. The honor of the Torah requires a covering. To say this in other words, in the first approach, the mitpachas is a din in the person. In order for the person to hold the Torah, he needs a mitpachas. The second approach is more than that. It's not just a gavra, it's also in the object. In the very Sefer Torah itself, it requires a mitpachas because it enhances the beauty and the honor of the Torah. We can actually explain the difference between Aleph and Beis, we can say this from another perspective. Tzidas is Anin Shlili. The first approach is that the mitpachas is to avoid something negative. Because it's disgraceful to hold the Sefer Torah without a cover, so therefore we have to hold it. We have to have a mitpachas to avoid something negative. Oder, the second approach is ayin chiyuvi. It's a positive thing. A mitpachas is ma'aseh mikavet Sefer Torah b'chlal. The mitpachas, the covering of the Torah, increases the honor of the Torah. When you open up the Aron Kodesh and you see a beautiful cover on the Sefer Torah, it makes the Sefer Torah look more beautiful, more honorable. So it's not just to avoid a negative; it's actually to create a positive. So there's sort of three ways. Number one that it is in order for the person to hold it, versus it beautifies the Sefer Torah. Number two, gavra and chavtza. Number three, shlili and chiyuv. Negative and positive. Gimel, but then there's a third approach. Does it need nor negiat to cover the Sefer Torah? Not only is it the honor of the Torah, that it's something, it's adding to the honor of the Torah, which means that it's not disconnected from the Torah, but it's something that's still somewhat not part of the Torah, that makes the Torah more beautiful. The third approach is it's connected with the very essence of the Torah. It's a part of the Torah. Just like the halacha is that when writing the Torah, there has to be margins above the column where the words are written. There is an empty space, and that's Chelek as a part of the halachas of Torah, the halacha of writing a sefer Torah. But no one's going to say, "Oh, you have where the words are. That's the actual Torah. Where the margins are, that's not part of the Torah." No, it's just as much part of the Torah as where the words are. So just like a Torah needs margins, a Torah needs a covering, which the covering then becomes just like the margins on the parchment. The mentala becomes a part of the Torah. So number one, it's not connected to the Torah. It's in order for the person to be able to hold the Torah properly. Number two, it is connected to the Torah because it makes the Torah more beautiful, more honorable. Number three, it's not just connected to the Torah, it's actually considered part of the Torah. And now we'll understand the three approaches in the Gemara. Later, first opinion holds that he's buried naked, literally without the shrouds. Netman on this day is following the approach as the mitpachas is blaze as that the covering of the Torah is a side thing. Alavush the Sefer Torah, it's only a garment. And therefore the punishment is for holding a Torah without its cover. As that we take the person's clothing away. By the person also his clothing are separate from him. And primarily a person wears clothing in order to interact with other people, or to take away the embarrassment of being naked. So the clothing is not part of the person. A person can change their clothing. Today they could dress in a certain manner, and the next day they could dress in a different manner. The clothing is a very external expression of a person. So since, according to this opinion, the cover of the Sefer Torah is an external thing, therefore he took away the external thing from the Torah, we take away something external from him, namely his clothing. Base. The Tzeit. The second opinion, that nikbar aron b'lei mitzvahs, that holds that the person is buried without his mitzvahs, is svarasei. The opinion of the logic of this opinion is as follows: as mitpachas is verbunden mit der Sefer Torah gufa, that the mitpachas, the cover of the Torah, is connected to the Torah. Und der Vater ist der eines von eiches Sefer Torah aron nikbar aron b'lei mitzvahs. And therefore the punishment is that he would be buried without mitzvahs. Weil die mitzvahs seinen die levushim von nishmas ha'adam und von Torah. Because the mitzvahs are the person's spiritual garments, and they are the garments of the Torah. Und nicht als a Seite gesagt, nur was ist verbunden mit Inyan Torah gufa. And it's not a side thing, an external thing. Mitzvahs are connected with Torah. Torah is in Torah is learning the halachas of these mitzvahs. And the mitzvahs are the garments with which the halachas are expressed into actuality. Just like we say in Chassidus about the levushim machshava dibur u'maisa, that there are vehicles with which the person expresses his feelings or his thoughts or whatever it is, his intellect, either into himself or says it out or does it or brings it into action. It's a vehicle from the person into the world. Similarly, when a person learns the halachas of Torah, how do those halachas become realized in the actual world? Through the mitzvahs. So the mitzvahs are the levushim of the Torah. Now the next day is by Adam Alei Torah, also the person who's learning the Torah. And is compared to Torah. As I know levushim linyan Torah shabai, that his garments to the Torah that he learns and is mitzvahs. So therefore, it's not enough to take away his clothes, his actual clothes or shrouds, because what he did was he affected something that was part of Torah, or that was at least connected to Torah. Therefore, to take away his clothes wouldn't be enough. We have to take away something from him that is connected to Torah. And therefore, we take away his mitzvahs. His mitzvahs are his levushim of the Torah that he learned. The mitzvahs are the levushim of Torah. And therefore, if there has to be a midah keneged midah to what he did, it has to be something more than just levushim. It has to be his spiritual levushim, which are his mitzvahs. Then we have the third opinion. Abaya says that he's being buried without that specific mitzvah. This will follow the third approach. Mitpachas is not something that's just connected to Torah. It becomes part of the Torah. And therefore he says, you can't say that the punishment is that you're taking away random mitzvahs from him. As much as we explained in the previous paragraph that the mitzvahs are the levushim of Torah mitzvahs, of Torah and of the person, but they're still just levushim. In this case, what the person did is he took away a piece of Torah, not just something that was connected to Torah. According to this opinion, the mitpachas is a piece of the Torah. So when he holds the Sefer Torah without the cover, he's actually taking away a piece of the Torah. So it's not enough to take away his mitzvahs that are just levushim, that are just connected to Torah, when his sin is that he took away a piece of Torah. Therefore, Rabbi says it must mean that the arum is with this specific mitzvah. We take away from him the levush or the reward of the very mitzvah of mitpachas. Because any other mitzvah is not actually connected to what he did. What he did is much worse than that, so to speak. So therefore, the only thing that we can punish him with is, or the only consequence that he could suffer is the fact that he loses the mitzvah that he did, or that he was supposed to do with the mitpachas. And in Siv Zayin, the Rebbe is going to go into the two opinions of Tosfos, and we'll have a better understanding of what this opinion actually holds. So far we know what it can't say. He can't say all the mitzvahs, or any mitzvahs, because those mitzvahs are levushim, and the mitpachas is a chelik of the Torah. So it's not consistent. What exactly it means, der mitzvah gufa, we're going to discuss more in Siv Zayin. Before we get to that, the Rebbe is going to say that based on this explanation, that this opinion holds that the Sefer Torah and the mitpachas become one, it'll actually explain to us the juxtaposition of the next statement in the Gemara in Megillah. Und damit wird echt Schukum und Atzes Bier in der Scheiche zwischen Maimer der Pfarnach mit Maimer Shalachrise. And this will also add to us, will give us an extra understanding in the connection between this statement of Reb Pfarnach and the next statement in the Gemara. Omer Rabbi Yanai said, Mutiv tigolol mitpachas v'al yigolol Sefer Torah b'seicha mitpachas. Rabbi Yanai says like this, that when you're wrapping up the Torah, there's two ways you can do it. You can have the Torah be held stationary, and then put today it's very easy, you just put the mentala from the top. But I guess in the olden days when they had a piece of cloth and they didn't have a fancy top, so they would wrap the cloth around the Torah. So it's preferable, says Rabbi Yanai, to hold the Torah in one place and to wrap the mentala around it, than to roll the Sefer Torah into the mentala. So now, based on what we said here, we'll understand that this is nit nor valbei the memories of the mitpachas. Why does the Gemara bring this over here? It's not just because both statements are discussing the mitpachas, the cover of the Torah. That does the hemshach v'gufa'inyan, it actually flows one to the next. Later, maskana mitpachas in the kizaytik levusudim to the sefer Torah. According to the conclusion of the Gemara, that the mitpachas, the cover of the Torah, is not a just an external garment. It's not even a garment that's connected with the Torah. Nor is it a chelek when the sefer Torah gufa. She's actually a piece of the Torah. We would have thought that says kechilik nitzim is geld mitpachas and the sefer Torah. Adam is geld the sefer Torah mitpachas. It wouldn't matter. You'd think it doesn't matter how you wrap it up. The mitpachas is a piece of Torah. So who cares if you're putting the mitpachas around the Torah or you're putting the Torah into the mitpachas? That's what you would think. In other words, now that we understand the third opinion and the maskana of the Gemara, that what's the Farnach saying? That Aron B'Lo Mitzvah means that the Sefer Torah is one with the mitpachas, then you would think that it doesn't matter how you roll it up, they're both equal. So after Rabbi Yanai, therefore Rabbi Yanai has to come and say, as Knesset is talking to tell you, you're right, it's not forbidden to roll the Torah into the mitpachas. Well, the mitpachas is medugmas gilyenis sefer Torah v'zayin l'maylo l'mato, because the mitpachas is like the margins that are above and below, and therefore it's already surrounded by the margins. So if you were to roll the Torah into the mitpachas, it wouldn't be an isir. Oberes is mutiv, but it is preferable as tigalal mitpachas to roll the mitpachas around the Torah. Well, this is fartnit the etzem Torah, because at the end of the day, it's actually not etzem Torah. In other words, in chelek HaTorah gufa, in saying that it's chelek of the Torah, it's still not mamish the etzem Torah, and therefore says Rabbi Yanai that it's preferable to wrap the mitpachas, the cover, around the Torah. So now we understand the flow of the Gemara, because you're telling me that they're the same thing. I might have not realized that there's a difference of how it's done. So Rabbi Yanai has to come and say that it's better to do it in this specific way. Now, let's go to Sif Zayin, let's go back to Tosfos. So to understand the first opinion of Tosfos that says that a person is losing mitzvahs achiza, the mitzvah of holding the Sefer Torah, so the Rabbi explains like this. The Gemara in Shabbos says like this. Hakerei al meiseh b'Shabbos, if somebody tears his garment because someone passed away on Shabbos, afal pish mechal at Shabbos, even though he's violated he desecrated the Shabbos, yatsa yedei kriya, but he's still yaitza the mitzvah, the halacha of kriya. Doesn't have to go again after Shabbos and tear another garment. Based on that, we would have thought that even though we're holding a Sefer Torah without its cover, we're doing something inappropriate. But we're still holding the Torah. We're still connected to the Torah. So we get a part of the mitzvah, at least, of holding a Torah. The Aveda is Nemefen Achiza. The wrong way of holding the Torah, the wrong manner of holding the Torah, doesn't diminish the fact that I'm holding a Torah. So this would be the Chiddush, according to the Yesh Mefarshim, the first opinion of Tosfos, in the third approach, the approach of Abaye, as dois nit mekayim the mitzvah, that he's not mekayim the mitzvah. Because the mitpachas is not separate from the Sefer Torah. No, the Chelek for Sefer Torah is a part of it. Und der Farben is the Sefer Torah Adam mitpachas felt in the Sefer Torah atzma b'mela mitzvah is Sefer Torah. You can't separate the two. You can't say, okay, at least he's holding the Torah. The whole mitzvah of achiza is with the mitpachas. The whole mitzvah is to hold it with a cover, and therefore, if you're holding without the cover, there's no holding. There's no proper holding. At least it doesn't count. That's what the Yesh Mefarshim says, that he loses the mitzvah of achiza b'Sefer Torah because he didn't hold it properly. But Tosfos doesn't accept this pirush. Because according to this, the following will be as leitin teretz von Abaye beit sich der pirush nikvar adam, that according to the answer of Abaye, the meaning of the words nikvar adam changes. That we lose the consistency here. In the first two approaches, it's a punishment. We're taking something away from him, either his clothing or his mitzvahs. So, later, maskana mitzvah, but according to this maskana, according to Abaye, is the achisaron and kima mitzvah, and it's order for the mitzvah atzma. He's bare of the actual mitzvah. It's not like he did the mitzvah and we're going to take away the reward from him, and we're going to take away the mitzvah from him. He never did the mitzvah in the first place. Tosfos doesn't like this because it's not flowing. If nikbar arum means that we're taking something from him, then also in the third version there has to be something that we take from him. And the way the Yes Mefarshim is saying is that we didn't take anything from him. He just didn't do it right in the first place. There was nothing to take. From Parshas Lashon Gemara aber is mashma as that alle drei days is together for nikbar arum derselben an einish benen by mepes too. The way the Gemara phrases it, and the way you would learn it, nikbar arum kasal kadaitach arum b'lei mitzvahs and arum b'lei yisa mitzvah. It's all about the arum. Each time it's just changing the focus. But it would seem that in each case we're just taking something from him. The Rebbe learned Riva. Therefore, the Riva comes and says, "As nikbar arum b'lei yisa mitzvah." It means without the mitzvah that he was doing at that time. It doesn't mean the mitzvah of achiza, of holding the Sefer Torah. It means that whatever mitzvah it was that he was doing while he was holding the Sefer Torah. That if he was holding the Sefer Torah without a cover and he was reading from it, in this Chaim and Kriya doesn't get the schar from the Kriya. He did do the mitzvah of learning Torah, or reading from the Torah. We punish him by taking away the reward for the reading of the Torah while it was uncovered. It's holding it uncovered and reading from it at the same time. So in other words, on this level, what we're explaining is the first opinion holds that it means that he did the mitzvah wrong, and therefore he doesn't get the schar for that mitzvah. So Tosfos says, one second, so Tosfos says, it can't mean that he did it wrong, because the other two meant that we were taking something away from him. Here you're saying that there's nothing to take away from him. So therefore Tosfos changes the pshat, and the Riva says that we are taking something from him. We're taking away the schar of whatever mitzvah he was doing while holding the Torah. The Rebbe takes it another level, a deeper level, and the Rebbe is going to say that in the approach, gufa, that the mitpachas, the cover of the Torah, is a chelek of the Torah. There's two ways of looking at it. Is it a chelek of the Torah, but it's only relevant to the holding of the Torah? Or is it a chelek of the Torah and is relevant to every aspect of Torah? And based on that, we'll understand the two opinions in Tosfos. Yes, Mefarshim, the first opinion of Tosfos, in Tosfos, and the Riva are also arguing what is the geder of mitpachas, what is the definition, the role of the cover of the Torah. According to Yes Mefarshim, it's a part of the Torah, meaning to say of the essence of the Torah. It is part of the Torah with the actual Sefer Torah, and therefore the only area where it will be where it affects the reward is with regards to the actual holding of the Torah. The mitpachas does not have a connection to those mitzvahs that are coming from the inside of the Torah, from the content of the Torah, from learning or reading Torah. In other words, you have the actual Sefer Torah, and then you have the Limud Torah that's inside of it. So the first opinion holds that while we do say this, according to this opinion, that the mitpachas is connected with the actual, it's a chelek, it's a piece of the Torah, it's a piece of the Sefer Torah, of the actual scroll, and therefore the only area of relevance is the holding of the Torah. Therefore, he says, if a person holds the Torah Arum uncovered, what would it affect? It would affect the mitzvah of holding the Torah. And therefore you can't say that it means the mitzvahs that he's doing at that time. Because the reading from the Torah has no connection to the mitpachas, to the cover of the Torah. Therefore, if a person transgresses the prohibition of holding a Sefer Torah uncovered, it won't affect the Kriya B'Torah. Because even though the mitpachas is a chelek of the Torah, it's not a chelek of the Torah that reaches the Kriya B'Torah. It might be a little bit of a subtle differentiation. So the Rebbe brings a raya to this. In the Mechiluk von Akareya b'Shabbos is Yatzadich Kriya, u'matzah gzula was any yitzda by Pesach. The Gemara in Yerushalmi is asking, what's the difference We just brought the Gemara in Shabbos that said if a person tears kriya, the rending of the garments on Shabbos, while he was mechalel Shabbos, he's still yoytze the mitzvah of kriya. So the Gemara asks in Yerushalmi, why is this any different than stolen matzah, that you cannot fulfill the mitzvah of achilas matzah on Pesach with a stolen matzah? So the Yerushalmi says, Tamon gufa aveda. The matzah itself is an aveda. Bram hocha hu avar aveda. By the kriya, he did something wrong, but the torn garment is not an aveda. Tearing it was problematic, but now that he has a torn garment, it's that in itself is not a prohibition. The matzah itself is problematic. It's a stolen matzah. The kriya as dasas hu avar aveda b'shas asiyah. The fact that he did something wrong during the act of tearing the garments, doesn't affect the mitzvah of kriya. Not like the matzah, where the matzah itself is an aveda. It is a stolen matzah. So therefore, this opinion holds that the fact that he held the Sefer Torah uncovered cannot affect the learning of the Torah while the Sefer Torah is uncovered. The only area that's affected is the holding of the Torah. That because he was holding the Torah uncovered, he does not get the mitzvah of holding a Torah because he did it wrong. That's what Riva over. Whereas, according to the Riva, the cover is connected to the whole Torah and all of its parts. All the details, all the elements of the Torah are all intertwined. Therefore, if he holds the Sefer Torah without a cover, it affects the perfection of the learning Torah. The learning Torah is incomplete because he was holding the Torah uncovered during that time. Even though in the person's action, there's two separate things happening here. He's holding the Torah and he's learning from it. It's two separate things, but according to the Riva, they're intertwined. And therefore the learning of Torah, or the reading from the Torah, is affected by the Eiches Arum, and therefore he doesn't get the schar for learning Torah because the Sefer Torah was Arum. So that's a deeper understanding in the two opinions in Tosfos. That even though we said that it's a chelek of the Torah, according to the first opinion of Tosfos, the fact that it's a chelek of the Torah only affects the Sefer Torah, the actual Torah scroll, and therefore it can't affect any of the other mitzvahs that he did at that time. And therefore he doesn't lose those mitzvahs. The only mitzvah that he loses out on is the mitzvah achiza, the mitzvah of holding the Sefer Torah properly. Whereas according to the Riva, there is an intrinsic connection between all the aspects of Torah, including learning Torah, and therefore when a person holds a Sefer Torah uncovered, his learning is incomplete, and therefore he loses the schar of that mitzvah as well, according to the Riva, and that is the explanation of the Tosfos. And Lefizeh, we now understand the three opinions of the Gemara. We understand that the three opinions of the Gemara is, number one, that that the cover is something totally external, and therefore we take away from him something totally external, namely his clothes. The second opinion is that it's external, but it is connected to the actual Torah. It enhances the beauty and the honor of the Torah, and therefore we take away something that is more connected to the person than clothing, such as his mitzvahs, which are his spiritual garments. And the third opinion is that the Sefer Torah, the cover of the Sefer Torah is connected to the Sefer Torah intrinsically. It's a part of the Torah. However, there's two ways of looking at it. According to one opinion, it's part of the Torah, meaning to say it's part of the Sefer Torah, and therefore, if a person holds the Sefer Torah without a cover, it affects the fulfillment of holding the Sefer Torah, and he loses the schar for holding the Sefer Torah because it wasn't done properly. Whereas the second opinion of Tosfos holds that when you say that it's a chelek of the Torah itself, it means of every part of Torah, including the learning of Torah, etc. And therefore, when a person learns Torah while holding the Sefer Torah without clothing, without its cover, he loses out on that mitzvah as well, because that mitzvah is incomplete because he was holding the Sefer Torah uncovered at the time. We'll now understand the conclusion of Tosfos, that if a person holds the Torah with the cover, then he has long life on one side, on the right side he has wealth and honor on the other side. Chazal sagen at the pasuk Chazal say that this pasuk read against face sugim and named the Torah two types of learners. L'mayminim, to those on the right, l'mayminim ba eirich yamim, to those on the right they have long life. L'masmilim ba eishav v'chaved, those on the left eishav v'chaved. Rashi explains mayminim ba eskim lishma, mayminim ba, those on the right are referring to those who learn Torah lishma. Masmilim shalei lishma, those who are on the left, this refers to Torah shaloi lishma. From the fact that the Gemara says that they get wealth and honor, he's moving on. Das meint on Eifen and Shalei Lishma, Avelchen Chazal Zagen Leizach and Asle Samamavis. When we say about Shalei Lishma, we don't mean a total disregard to Torah, upon which the Chazal said that if someone is not meritorious, the Torah becomes a poison. That can't be what we're talking about, because we say Oisha v'chavit. There has to be a level in Shalei Lishma that at least is still enough to bring about wealth and honor. The beer bazeh. What does this mean? We had the Sikha in Chelek Yud Zayin. Shalei Lishma b'dakus meint nit nur alimut tzliba pniya, was is nit verbunden mit Avodas Hashem. When we say Shalei Lishma on a more subtle level, on a more refined level, it's not referring to someone that has a totally ulterior motive to learning Torah. He wants to become a big famous person, whatever it is. Even if he's learning for the sake of knowing what to do, is Shalei Lishma, it's considered Shalei Lishma, not for the sake of Torah. The limud is nit l'shem Torah, limud Torah atzman, it's l'gim mitzvahs, because he's not learning for the sake of Torah. He's learning for the sake of the mitzvahs. Lishma b'shleimus meint limud Torah l'shem asagas Torah atzma. True Lishma means when he's learning it for the sake of Torah itself. Derech lashon Chazal, as Chazal say about droish v'kabel schar, learn and you will get reward. Aber nit droish zu lieben kabel schar. Yagdol Torah v'yader. We're not learning for the sake of receiving schar. We're learning Torah for the sake of Torah. Yagdol Torah v'yader. We're learning for the sake of Torah to make the Torah great. Ultimately, Shema is when you learn for the sake of the Torah itself. So you have Lishma when you learn for the sake of Torah. Shalei Lishma is when you're learning it for, let's say, for example, to know what to do. Das ist echt der Linie von Mitpachas und Sefer Torah Beruchnis, was ist Kinal Achelek and Guf Sefer Torah. So now, based on this, we'll understand that there is a cover of the Torah on a spiritual level. To know what to do is absolutely necessary. It's the first type of learning. Aber das ist noch nicht limit Torah mitzad atzma. There's only mitzvahs, but it's not for the sake of the Torah itself. On the other hand, it's not like the mitzvahs themselves, which are actually separate from Torah. It's just the only garments that are connected to Torah. The halachas Torah, as we said before, the mitzvahs are the bringing the halacha into actuality, but it's not the actual Torah. So mitzvahs so you have three levels. You have mitzvahs that are separate from Torah. They're the levushim of Torah, but they're separate. Then you have the learning of Torah for the sake of knowing what to do, which is hakel limud Torah, but it is for an external reason. Then you have actually learning Torah l'shem Torah atzma. So when a person is learning Torah for the sake of Torah, for the sake of mitzvahs, it's not like the mitzvahs that are removed from Torah. No, it doesn't. It says but when the person learns Torah for the sake of knowing what to do, it's still part of Torah because it's a form of learning Torah. Now the gabit limud Torah lishma l'shem Torah atzma is the limud b'dugmut samet pachas alavush from gufa mitzvah limud. It's just that compared to learning Torah lishma for the sake of Torah itself, it's compared to a cover, to the Torah mentala, to the cover of the Torah. So in other words, you have the Torah itself, which is limud Torah itself, is l'shem Torah atzma. Then you have learning Torah for the sake of mitzvahs, of knowing what to do, which is considered an external way of learning Torah, Shalei Lishma, Mas Me'ilim, as we're going to say in a moment. It's like the Mitpachas. It's like the cover of the Torah. Und das ist Teisves Messiah, and this is the conclusion of Teisves. As B'shas, Achazim Mitpachas. Und zusammen der mit V'karaboy, wie Teisves sagt früher, early, Teisves doesn't say the words again, V'karaboy, but previously said V'karaboy. But so if you're holding the Mitpachas, and you're learning Torah, is Eirech Yom Minu B'Shalei Shev'chavit. B'shas Mad Beidin Yad, if you have both. Sai Mas Me'ilim B'Shalei Lishma. The limit is Leides Amaisa Shayasun. Versus Merumas and Achzim Mitpachas. You have the learning for the sake of knowing what to do, which is the left, which is the Shalei Lishma, which is alluded to in the words Achzim Mitpachas, because the Mitpachas is external to the Torah. Unsai v'karobai, but at the same time, you also have the limud lishma, was meant the kriya, the limud atayra lishma l'shem atayra, my meaning ba. You also have the right side, the learning Torah l'shem atayra. So ochzi b'mitpachas v'karobai. You have the limud atayra l'shem leidus amaisa sheyasun, and you have the limud atayra in order to l'shem atayra atzma. Now kum beidin yon eschar, then you get both schar. Just like we said before, that you don't get the schar for learning Torah. If there was no mitpachas, if you have a mitpachas, and spiritually speaking, it means you're learning Torah, both to know what to do and for the sake of the Torah itself. Then you have both schar, and sai in the most literal sense. Biz the true long life, the true wealth, and the true honor. Mamash.